Hi everybody, welcome back. I'm Brian Ricks.
And I'm Aaron Steele.
Still the same people we were before. So we are going to kick off this next session on configuring users and rights. And the key core focus of this particular session is on RBAC. So the rights-based, roles-based administration and
roles-based access controls.
Wow, it's been a long morning. All of your 90 minutes of talk before. Anyway, we're back. So RBAC is what we're going to be talking about. And RBAC specifically in what and how we use it within the Lync environment. If we think about users and deployments, the more complex we get, the more we need the ability to delegate who can do what within the environment. It becomes really important in very large deployments, but it could also be where we just have a help desk user that we need to do some functionality and then the administrator that does everything else. So trying to figure out that separation is where RBAC comes into play. And we'll have a demo of this at the end of this particular discussion so we can figure out if what we said is right, which of course it will be, but it will be the ability to show that by OUs, by configurations, by specific rights and how that all works. So we'll get more into that as we go along. So we're going to start with managing Lync server in general. We talked a little bit about some of this previously, but the control panel, what's on the control panel, the management shell, what's new or not using, and PowerShell 3, what that gains and doesn't gain because, as Aaron mentioned before, we are actually still PowerShell 2 commandlets. But we can leverage the 3 environment, and we do. So we'll get into that. So the control panel, if we're looking at the Lync server control panel, you'll notice off the get that, it looks the same. And in majority of things, it is the same. Your biggest changes that we end up having are around 2 different environments. One being, you'll notice persisting chat is within the environment, and there's an actual tab that exists. And you'll also notice that we have a difference in, well, you can't see it from here, but within the actual client sections, we have additionals and changes. We have mobility directly integrated, which was before, but now there's more. We have the persistent chat world, which is going to be a discussion later tomorrow, actually. And we're going to discuss how we manage things directly within the environment.
Have they also split out voice routing from voice features?
Well, voice features always existed to be your call park services as well as your vacant numbers. That still exists. Voice routing gets into your full day's fun of figuring out how to normalize where things go. The interface for voice routing changes slightly. We get into that in enterprise voice. The bigger thing to acknowledge in this part of the demonstration or the module is it's the same user interface. There shouldn't be any fears how and what we get into the various environments. But otherwise, everything looks very similar. From a Lync management shell, when we're looking at the management shell, as we said, it's built on PowerShell 2. PowerShell 3 is required to get it to be installed and to work. And there's, like before, a gazillion number of commandlets and options that we can configure. Now, gazillion, it's probably not quite true. There's 550 product specific, and there's a couple more than that now. But it's really about how many ways we can slice and dice those various commandlets. Much of this isn't a PowerShell class by any means, but keep in mind, PowerShell is, in general, something that we use when we're doing mass configuration changes. Also as things that aren't exposed in the management shell, things that are global specific or designed to be something that is environmental and so not exposed through the management shell, or through the control panel rather. So we have to use the management shell. It's not a lot, but there are things that exist there. Whenever we're dealing with specific commandlets, like in our example, our new user replication configuration, we always have the option to preface the new command with get-help space and then the command you want help on. I will say if you do a get-help and then do a get-whatever, you're not going to get back much information on help because it's going to tell you this is the command that will get back this information.
Right. The get commands don't have a ton of help on them because they're just returning information.
That's right. But in the new, invoke, sets, they all have tons of information. And always, if you don't know what you're looking for, end the command, the get command with -full. And that will bring back everything that they have regarding that information. It should be the same thing that's online, So the information is available at your fingertips. You can copy paste it right out of the command management shell. So great to go. We do have the following the same commandlet and types that we had before. So we're going to have the verb dash noun. No different than we've had in 2010. No different than we have in Exchange. It's the concept of you have a verb, a dash, a noun, and then again we have the get dash help. Get help's a great tool. Don't not leverage it. Don't
Leverage
it.
Leverage get dash help.
Do not leverage it. There we go. The parameters are things that we tie to the PowerShell verb and then the noun. So again, your verbs are going to be your get, your invokes, your sets, your remove, whatever they happen to be from a verb, action. And then the noun is going to be the object we're tying that to. And then your parameters are things that you want to tie it down. It'll limit what you're doing or it may specify what you're doing too. A lot of times, a lot of our PowerShell requires us to specify what pool are we talking about, what user are we talking about, which object within Lync specifically, because there could be more than one. If we don't specify an identity or something of that nature, we're going to be assuming a global. A good example of that is if we're setting dash, what's a good one? Let's say we're setting the configuration for all users and we're doing a set CS. If we don't specify if it's a tag or a site variable configuration, we're setting the global. So it's important to make sure we're scoping it correctly or we could do things that we don't want it to do. Also important that we can do the what if. You can always use what if at the very end, dash what if, and if you run any PowerShell command with the dash what if, you're going to get a process that it'll say, if you ran this, this is what would have happened. It could be an error. It could say it's not going to work. It could also come back and say, I'm going to make these changes to X, Y, and Z, and it would be successful. So it's really important to test things.
It's very useful.
And knowing what's the what. But again, this is PowerShell, not that exciting or new. It's the same as always.
Yep.
So really, what do we gain with PowerShell 3? My favorite is I get my tab complete without overriding. Awesome feature. So let's say I'm making a change to a PowerShell command I've written, but I want that PowerShell command to change a parameter. Let's say that parameter is the identity. And I didn't specify it, but I've already got the entire command written, and I need to go back up to the beginning and put it in. I can go within a PowerShell command, do a dash and start typing the command and tab it out, and it doesn't erase everything after that tab. It just, kind of injects it within it. It could make a mess because it could be partially in the middle of something as you're tabbing out. It doesn't really know or care where the PowerShell command is constructed, but the fact that you can tab without removing. You can also tab complete well-known variables. So let's say you have a parameter of colors, which isn't anything of value, but let's say the parameter is dash color. You could space and then tab, and because it knows there's only certain things that can be accepted within that value of color, it's going to start cycling red, green, blue, yellow, orange, or whatever the options are. So now now you can actually tab complete a complete PowerShell command in PowerShell 3 without actually knowing what you can use in your tabs. Just tab, next, don't carry up. I want that one, next, tab, what are my options? And kind of cycle through the creation of your PowerShell command. So PowerShell 3 gives us a lot of additional functionality, even though from a actual commandlet perspective, it's only leveraging PowerShell 2. Okay. So that's our little tie-up on everything about PowerShell and the control panel. Again, there wasn't a lot because nothing's really changed. All the same thing.
New commandlets for interacting with some of the new features.
Oh, sure. We're going to have the additions and creations of things. And if you look at the previous slide, the get service, display name Windows asterisk, where we're showing wildcards, we can do the same thing with just get dash, then do a starling star, and it'll pull back anything that, or CS in our case, and it'll pull back all the commandlets that have CS within the command. For us, that helps us know exactly what it is we're trying to get. So again, new commandlets based off 2, using PowerShell 3. We get the advantages of 3's interactions with the user, but we don't get the advantages of any new logic that's within PowerShell 3. So RBAC. This is really the interesting part of the communication, I think. I think RBAC in 2010 was introduced, as we said before, by creating Active Directory groups We could put people in those groups. They got those roles. We could put them in multiple groups to get a cumulative type role. But if that role wasn't what we wanted, it either had too much or too little. It was just the way it was. In 2010, we didn't have an option. In 2013, there are still predefined roles, but we have the option to create customized roles. We can also do some modifications to existing. So we can mess things up, fairly simple, but we can also do things to allow us to get exactly what we need and exactly limited to what we need. So as we look at this, we want to talk about what RBAC is. So if we're doing role-based access control, we're doing conceptually, help desk is different than voice administrators is different than the
larger
world
deployments.
admins.
So maybe larger deployments.
Large, but again, also we could have a two-man IT shop where maybe I just want them doing the admin's changes, but I don't want them touching the infrastructure. Well, they don't need to be administrators of the Lync world. They just need to be
Mac tech.
Right, a Mac tech server. So we give them the ability to have those roles defined, and they've been there since 2010 out of the box in generality. But that's what RBAC is designed for. It's also important to note that it is exclusively a PowerShell thing. So if we are on and we grant access to this tech to get onto the Lync server, and he gets into the local management shell, he has different roles based off of
local permissions
rights
on the box.
Versus, so if you've given him admin rights to the box, well, you're undoing some of the restrictions that you're trying to do. So it's all meant for remote access.
It's enforced through the remoting engine.
That's right, because everything's happening on behalf of your request because there's something that's doing it on your behalf. So every time you load the control panel, whether it's on the server or remotely, it's always doing things on your behalf based off of your rights-based access. That's why sometimes you'll notice if you try to modify an administrator, someone who has admin rights within the domain, and you try to use the control panel, it gets blocked. Well, that's because it didn't inherit the rights to allow the RBAC commandlets to enforce those various changes. So using the control panel, we can get by, or the management shell, we can get by that because that's your rights. That's you locally on that machine running the ability to make changes and stuff. A role includes commandlets. It creates specific PowerShell commands that are custom that you've created. We can set scoping of things. The scopes can be OU level. They can be site level. That can be something that says, we have an Amsterdam site or a European site, and we have a North America Redmond site. Well, I only want administrators that are in Redmond managing Redmond stuff. I only want people that are in Europe managing the Amsterdam stuff. Simple enough to do. We can even go further and say users that are in an OU and Active Directory, we can give them rights to manage those users, but nobody else. So users that are in Active, assuming that you split up your Active Directory accordingly, users that are in one OU are managed by the people in Europe. The things that are managed by the people in Redmond are only managed by the Redmond. Or maybe Redmond can do everybody. Again, the idea is that you can make the decision of who and where within AD and within the logical site configuration of Lync, who can do what, when, and where. And again, in our demo, we'll actually show where some things can and can't be done even though they have the rights to do so based off scoping. And that's the goal. That was the goal of RBAC, was to give us the ability to give the different rights to different users in different locations at different levels. So let's look at the predefined roles. Right? These are the things that come out of the box. A lot of these you'll notice are exactly what they were before. The big change would be that you have a response group manager now, and you have a persistent chat administrator now. So the CS administrator is the user that has the rights to do anything everywhere. He can perform everything. So this is the person that's installing the original deployment, as well as anybody that needs to potentially maintain or change this. Again, in small environments, this is what you'll want to be in so that you can do things. And you'll notice when you first install the Lync and you've provisioned the environment, then your forest and domain prep, the group is there, nobody's in it, not even domain admins. By default, domain admins don't have rights to administer Lync. So going ahead and adding whatever groups or users are appropriate to that group, logging out, logging back in, you can go ahead and launch the control panel. Otherwise, you'll be locked out. User administrators, voice administrators, server administrators, those are all things that are administering those specific rules and rights. So users can manage your users, obviously. Voice is for those that are that are bringing over the telco group into the Lync group and need to manage specific voice-only things. Servers would be when if you have a server team delegated different than the application level. So you need somebody to manage the configuration, look at services, restart things. There could be service accounts that are members of this as well. View only is another great monitoring group where if people just need to see what's going on but don't need to necessarily do anything, that would be what that's for. Help desk exists to give you the basics of user properties and policies. They can't really make any major changes, but they can view stuff so that they can do troubleshooting things and figure out why you can't do things prior to escalation. So think of that as a tier 1 help test. They're just not getting up to where they can actually do stuff.
Sure, but they can still take a look at things and try and help the further on techs understand what's going on.
And at least they've done the basic troubleshooting of saying, well, he is a member of this, he does have this policy applied. I don't know why it's not working. Here you go. So, but they've done the basics.
Right. He was supposed to get it.
Right.
More than just he thought he was supposed to get it.
That's right. The archiving administrator is specific to that. He's archiving. He does things that are specific to can I or can I not do archiving. And if I can do archiving, that means I can pull data out, I can pull, I can retrieve, and I can purge data. There's information specific to archiving. That's what he's for. Again, we have the response group administrator, and then we have the manager. The response group administrator can do any and all response groups. He can manage, maintain, change. The response group manager will only be able to manage those that they've explicitly been assigned to within the creation of the response group itself. So there's a new field within response groups for that specific user. Is it managed? If so, who can manage them? And then we have persistent chat, which is our, not to belittle persistent chat, but it's there, and it's new, and it's exciting for us in the new world because group chat could be painful or was painful prior. So, and we'll see much more of that as we get into things tomorrow, I believe.
Yep, that's our target.
Yeah, that's our goal. So, creating, modifying, and making changes to RBAC. Again, RBAC roles that exist today can be modified. The key to remember when we're creating new RBAC role groups is 1, the physical Active Directory group has to be present prior to running the role because we're making changes to that specific role. And 2, that we have to start somewhere. So we have to give it some sort of template. And when we look at how we're making the various groups, we can look at the template of a defined administration right. So this is something saying when we looked back at CS administrator or help desk or response group manager, that would be where we're starting. They have all of those rights, and maybe that's all they have. Of course, I'm not sure why you've made a custom role, unless
maybe
you're scoping it specifically to something or changing something.
These things.
Right. But in addition, we can remove specific commandlets that they can run or add additional commandlets to that. And again, we'll go through that in our demo to show how that works and goes through things. Commandlets are the specific commandlets. And then we include in here, even though honestly, I've never seen an organization deploy the script module option, but you do have the option to create your own custom scripts. The location is included here on the slide of where they physically go. And then you can include those scripts as additional things so that they can run. So, well, they have to have the rights to actually run them physically within the environment. But if you created your own custom commands that you use within your organization, this is where you would include those custom creations, things that you made that you think are awesome and everybody wants to use. So those are the limitations, right? We're using our template to start, and then we do scope, user scope, and that's where we limit things based off of the OUs, and then we have config scope, which limits things off of the Lync site. So again, that's our logical sites within our Lync deployment. Very important. So when we go ahead and we're going to create a custom RBAC, we are going to start with, again, creating our universal security group. And this is important because, again, when we run the commandlet of creating the new admin role, we're applying our settings to this group logically within Active Directory. We're actually provisioning and ACLing down this particular group. That ACLing can't happen if it doesn't exist. And you'll get a big, nice red error that it doesn't exist if you do so.
Oh, come on.
That's what happens, right? So when we're creating it in this example, we have created the group called CS on-prem admin, and then we have identified that's the group we're going to use, and then we've identified the template that we're going to be applying to things. So the template is the CS user administrator. So in our world, the on-prem administrator is just a user administrator. But the big thing is that we're locking it down to the accounts group only. So only users located in this accounts OU will this user have the ability to do, by default, the user administrator rights. We then add whatever users we want to this group. When they log out and log in, they're a member of those groups. And voila, everything just works from a functionality perspective based off our new creations and customizations. Again, we'll see something of this very concept as we go through the demo here in a few minutes. But keep in mind, as Aaron pointed out, you could very well want just the CS administrator role just kind of scoped down so that if you're in a big organization with multi-sites, international is a good example. There could be political boundaries that we have to run into. There could be legal boundaries that we need to play with, where people only from this country can only touch people in their country, and that's just the way it goes. Or maybe it's a secured group and a secure location of a Lync environment. So working with some defense contractors that I've done, there's been people that can only touch people that are within this specialized group because that's what their internal IT policies explicitly say, from an Active Directory and now from a Lync perspective. We can do all of that through RBAC creations, just managing it through a new roles. And it's all reflected correctly in all of our reports and within the control panel as well, which again, we'll show. So with that, what's new in RBAC 2013? As we've said, the ability to do new custom creations and the two new roles. So group manager role and persistent channel role.
So we've got a quick question for you, Brian. From
Sure.
Yes. Can a CS administrator run scripts by default, or do we need to give them that custom RBAC role?
Run scripts, custom scripts? They could, by default, run their custom scripts role, yes.
If you're a CS admin,
if you're
you
a CS
have
admin,
those...
you have rights to do basically anything on the box. You're elevated. So that's important to know that is a very unscoped, out of the box, CS administrator is a very powerful role. It can do anything to the environment. It can remove anything from the environment. It can run topology builder. It can do all kinds of stuff, right? So if in fact you've decided that you want a member to be a member of CS administrator, just keep in mind that's what's going to happen. Okay, so now we get into our demo part. So this is where we should get exciting and fun. So what we want to do is, as we're looking at the demo, we are going to see that, let's go ahead and do this here. Come on. Bring it up as we wait for it to launch. We did hopefully appease the demo gods this morning, and everything's going to go perfectly. That's our goal anyway. So we will go ahead and
Vamp while you're waiting.
It's up. Okay. So looking at this environment, we have created a new user called Amy Strand. Amy Strand we went ahead and put into the RTC special accounts. Now, would it normally be there? Probably not. But for the sake of this demo, this is where we want this particular user because we're going to lock things down to just this OU. We also have all of our other existing users in the accounts. Okay. So that's how our domain structure is broken up. There's the accounts and the RTC special accounts. Is
it still required for things to be contained in an OU? They can't be in a container, correct? You can't put roles and restrictions on things in like the users or built-in container, since they're containers, not OUs. In your targeting, I think you can't target it.
I've actually never tried, so I couldn't say one way or the other. Because as a best practice, we don't use the built-in containers. We make custom OUs so that we can apply group policies and do things appropriately to those OUs. That's a great question. I don't know. All right, so that's how our Active Directory is configured, very simplistic. On our Lync server, what we want to do is create actually I forgot to create my group first. Very first step. We want to create a group, right? So again, in order to create a custom admin role, we have to have some object, and in this case, it is a group, that has the ability to exist. We can't ACL things something that doesn't have it and exist, and it doesn't have the ability to create it if it doesn't exist. Right. So
that's
we have to put something here. So we're going to enter here CS on-prem admin. So similar to how we had, similar to how we had it before, and we're going to mark it as a universal group. Okay, so, and it has to be a security group. Distribution groups, they don't work so well. We're going to go ahead and create this group. It really doesn't matter where, it just has to exist as a group. Okay? In my case, it's a special account group, so it actually makes sense that it's here on the CS on-prem admin group. Now, as I go back to my Lync server, I'm going to go to my management shell. And when I bring up my management shell, I'm going to create this new group. So let's go ahead and start seeing if I can not fat finger the group and do a CS admin. And we're going to tab everything out that we can, because tabbing is our friend. And remember, shift tab goes back. So if you're tab, get too far, -1, shift tab goes backwards. So you're scrolling backwards, tab scrolls forward.
Very helpful.
Very helpful. Especially when you're tabbing through a lot of stuff and you don't want to start the list over. Okay. Now we're going to have to give it a name. We need to know what is this actual admin. And we're going to say it's the CS on-prem admin. Right? And as we create this definition, we have to define, as we said before, what template we want to use. Now the templates are what existed before. What we're going to do in this example is mess it up. Now this is on purpose, so don't get us wrong. We're specifying that this is going to be, we're going to say we're going to make this a voice admin, and it's not going to do what we want it to do. So we're going to start with the CS voice administrator. And if you typo anything here, when you go to run it, it won't work. So administrator, administrator. And then we're going to scope it. So the user scope for us will be an OU, and then OU equals RTC special accounts, DC equals on-prem, and DC equals local. Now sometimes it can be cumbersome and you have a very deep scope level of where you're going. One of the things you can do as a little FYI is back on your domain controller. If I was to get as long as my view is advanced, let's turn advanced on, and I come to my RTC special accounts and do my properties, properties, one of the things that nicely in 2008 R2 and above of a domain controller shows us our attribute editor. If I go into attribute editor, I can filter to just something that has values, and one of them will be my distinguished name. And you'll see right here, if I double click on it, while I can't modify it, I can do a Control-C, cancel out of it, and then I can go paste that into whatever particular field I'm having to do. The same thing holds true for a user. If I need to get their actual properties of, that's not what there we go, my distinguished name for a user, I can view that actual distinguished name pre-written out with spaces, typos as they may or may not be. If there's commas, the backslashes will be in it automatically for you, so you don't need to figure these things out. So just as a potential quick tip. Okay, back to where we're at. So here again we have a new CS admin role. We're going to call it CS on-prem admin. We're going to use the CS voice administrator template as the base of what we're making here. And we're scoping it down to the RTC special accounts on-prem local. Okay, so assuming I've typed everything right, we'll hit enter. And churn as it will create this new role. And there it is. Now you notice a SIG gets associated to it. It's all becomes something special and fancy. And it's not something that we need to worry about.
Can you zoom in?
Oh, let me see if I can. I don't believe so, but that's as low as I can go. Let us do this.
Font.
Let's just go.
No,
I'm gonna have to do.
tab.
Yeah, I just see if we can get anything better, but I don't think so. Better. Okay, better. So, again, created the new admin role, gave it a name, and the name is the group name, right? So if that group doesn't exist, we're gonna have an error. The template that we're gonna base it off of, we've scoped it down, and this exists. So everything's going good there. Now, like we said before, now that we have this group, and if we go ahead and look at its properties to see what just happened, we can look at the attribute editor and see that it has basic rights and changes. Nothing looks fancy or familiar with it, but everything's going to work the way we want it to do based off of group types and how he's physically working. Okay, so good. We can see it's been updated, things are happy, things are good to go. Let's take Amy Strand and let's add her to that group. Now we can either go into the group and add the user, or we can go to the user and add the group. So we'll do it the other way. CS on-prem, and there's our CS on-prem administrator. Okay, so now CS on-prem administrator group, Amy's a member of. We're good there.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to come back, and here's our control panel. Now again, this is the administrator. We're going to sign out as the admin. Assuming I remember Amy's password, which I think I do, we should be good to go here. Come on. There we go. AMST, pass that word 1. And we roll ever so fastly, and here we go, come on. Aha, okay. Now you'll notice up in the upper right, Amy Strand is the user that's logged in, and if we view our roles, you'll notice she is a CS on-prem admin. So it's going to correctly reflect that role because from a Lync perspective, that is an actual role, just as CS administrator is a role. So if we come to users, again, she was made as a voice administrator. You notice enable users is grayed out. It's not there. If I find a user, I have the ability to do a get, but I don't have the ability to do a new. Right? So if I want to do some changes from a voice perspective, let's go into Amy. And again, her account, as a reminder, is in that RTC special accounts group. So if I come down to location policy, something a voice administrator can do, you'll notice everything else is kind of grayed out. PIN policies are available, location policies available, and the ability to enter a tell URI is available. But we can't actually enable them for enterprise voice because that's not a role by standard of the voice administrator. So let's go down to our location policy, and we made a generic one called a user location policy. And we're going to go ahead and commit that rule, and that was accepted. That worked just fine. Now, we're going to go up to Bob, or down to Bob, as it were, and do the exact same thing. Let's set Bob's location policy to user location policy. And when we go to commit it, it's going to say, sorry, can't do that because it's not part of their scope. Again, because Bob is not part of the OU, which we set this thing to. So being able to just take the same role but set it to specific OUs within Active Directory can give you a lot of power over what users can and can't do based off of where objects are located within Active Directory. Okay, so we saw it before. We didn't have the ability on users, so let's cancel that. Maybe. And we didn't have the ability to create a user. So as this reconnects on the outside. So let's go ahead and say, well, let's go ahead and enable the user with that additional commandlet. Oh, we're still reconnecting. And it's coming up, I'm sure. Any second now. So what we're going to do is we're going to go run the set CSAdmin role. We're going to specify the group we're going to set it to.
Somebody was very helpful in noting that we should have installed the sysinternals zoom it tool.
Oh. Okay. Unfortunately, these are servers that are being provided, so we don't have as much flexibility as we'd like, but they do hopefully show what we need them to do.
Quick question from the field.
Sure.
Would an RBAC role automatically have permissions over any accounts created in an OU within that top level OU? So if in your RTC special accounts OU create a sub OU, do I get permissions to everything in that sub OU as well?
Yes. Yes. So we're giving it at what scope level are we allowing it to go down? So if you were planning on using the RBAC to delineate who and what can do what where, it's important that Active Directory matches that same concept. And typically, when we're talking large enterprises, this has all been thought out because they have the exact same customizations of RBAC that exist today within Active Directory, where they've limited the scope of who can manage and create and modify users within Active Directory. So the exact same concepts would still exist, and that all has to do with inheritance. Now, it is important to note that if you have a user that is an enterprise user, because he's marked as an enterprise user, a domain admin, an enterprise admin, he will get the inheritance flag unchecked on his Active Directory object, which means no, you won't have rights over that particular user because he's an elevated admin with an Active Directory.
It's the same
It's the
problem.
inheritance. Same problem. Exactly. Inheritance is inheritance. The way we get down levels is because of inheritance. So if inheritance is unchecked, then it's not going to work. Could you manually customize some of this and turn inheritance off in OUs? You could get Active Directory fun, and sure, why not? Okay. So one thing to look here is, as you're looking at the commandlet, you'll notice it starts to list off some of the ones that are getting here. We're just showing a snippet of it, but get AD contact, get AD user, get analog device. You'll notice those are the things that are part of the voice administrator. If I incorrectly, and so we're going to show an incorrect way to do this, if I incorrectly define, I think we lost connection again. If we incorrectly define an additional commandlet without doing the add command, we will override the value. The way PowerShell works is a multi-valued field, unless we're telling it to add to that multi-valued field, we are setting the multi-valued field to whatever value we've just passed. And so hopefully we'll be able to show that here in a second. But unfortunately, we continually drop our communication for some reason. Okay. So, while this is going so well, any other questions that we have in the queue that we can address while we're waiting on?
So somebody asked sort of a more VM sizing questions. From our previous session, somebody asked a bit of a question about VM sizing and the idea that are VM sized the same as physical servers? And as of right now, they are effectively sized the same way, right?
Right. Your limit's your VM world.
Right.
We don't know what it is or what else it's doing.
Right, but we still have the same requirement, a 12-core box with 32 gigs of RAM with those disk speeds. That is what we require. If that's a VM or a physical box, we still want the same thing out of that same server.
That's right. If you can provide the same specifications that a physical box can provide, you can virtualize it. Yep. If your virtual environment does not have the same capacity, keep that in mind. Or if you're doing things where you believe you're not going to meet the capacity, keep that in mind. I mean, so if you, instead of being able to scope or size it for a 6,000 user box, maybe it's only sized for a 3,000 user box. Same thing happens with SQL. If we're sharing SQL on the back end because we have some massive SQL Server enterprise or data center level that we're running, if SQL kicks off because of and this is stories, we had a user that they would complain that presence got very slow every end of month at about 11 in the afternoon till about 2 in the afternoon, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And that was because this super special SQL backend that they promised could never be impacted on their backend storage was running an end-of-month queries and batch jobs that ate up all the I/O,
but it could never be impacted.
It could never be impacted. And so there you go. SQL, we in 2010 especially relied heavily on the SQL backend to be immediately available with a lot of I/O available, producing a lot of changes rapidly. And if there were any delays, presence was delayed. So things of the environment do directly impact what we have. Let me go ahead and while we're doing this, we do not seem to be reconnecting, so let me just try to relaunch it. And any other questions we have?
No, sorry about the demos. I'm having the same problem in some of my environments. So, somebody's commenting on what tool is being used to control our demo VMs, and this is a little plug we can give to our friends at HOL Systems.
That's who we're using.
So HOL Systems is actually it's a nice little interface, and we're using a little piece of their infrastructure right now. So, let's see what else.
Oh, okay. Hopefully, look at that. Opening, having issues. Wow. We did see Amy was unable to modify someone outside of her OU. That's great.
Okay, we're having a little trouble here. Do we want to take a quick break and try and get our VM issues wrapped up and give people a short break, or do we want to break for lunch? What's your thought, Brian?
That's a great question. And I would say, It would depend on the time. What time do we have?
11:23.
Yeah, a little
Okay.
after 11 here.
So,
Up to you guys.
yeah, well, why don't we do this? We'll take a meal break, and we'll go from here. Well, it'll be approximately an hour break that we'll give everybody. Hopefully during that time, when we come back, we can wrap this up quickly and just show, there's only a couple more things we're going to show during this demo, and then we will continue on from there. So,
Great.
sounds good? All right, then we'll see everybody in about an hour.